Cool. Um, so I just like to start off by introducing kind of what a call for submissions is, in case you may have not really encountered them before. So a call is basically just like a public invitation from an institution to submit your work for consideration as part of their programs. Call for submissions is great for two reasons. One, it shows an organization who wants to be involved in their programs. It kind of like puts it out into the community and lets us know, who wants to, you know, um, who wants to show their work with us, but also it shows what those community members are working on. So it kind of gives a look into your studio, into your mind, and what you've been kind of spending your time with. There are a number of different kinds of calls for submissions. There are artwork submissions. So there's like artwork submissions for a group exhibition, for a screening, for a festival. And there are also exhibition proposals. So that can take shape as like a curated group exhibition, or also for a solo exhibition. There are residencies, commissions, workshops, and writings that, those are all kind of formats that it can take. So for workshops, for instance, InterAccess welcomes proposals for workshops at any time. And for things like writings, like if you're, a magazine or publication, you'll put a call out for writings, and for conferences and things like that as well, like a call for papers is something that often kind of gets circulated as well. And so I'm going to look through some recent examples, some active, some not, from recent InterAccess calls, so you can get a look at them. You may have seen some of these already. The first one I'm going to start with looking at is this group exhibition that's coming up soon that I'm curating, called Life as We Know It. So this is an active call right now, and I invite you to kind of take a deeper look at it whenever you have a chance. But this is kind of like a very standard call for submissions format. You've got the title, it says call for works, so we're looking for, in this case, artworks. There's the deadline right up at the top. And then we kind of get into some thematic text that explains what the exhibition is about. In this case, the exhibition is dealing with like biomimicry, so human design and the ways that it's influenced by forms and systems found in nature. So that's the kind of theme. So I'm talking a little bit about what biomimicry is here, and then talking about it in the last kind of chunk here that begins with Life as We Know It, talking about how biomimicry takes shape in the scope of an exhibition. And then there are some questions here. A lot of calls will include questions that, if you can kind of find a response to that question through your work, that's a nice entry point. So how have plant forms and animal behaviors and the cycles of entire ecosystems shaped artistic practice? How can we destabilize nature, culture, and human, non-human binaries and refigure the anthropocentric hierarchies that sustain them? What is human nature, and how do our technologies reflect this? These kind of questions should prompt you to think about whether or not your work addresses any of this at all. And if it does, then you're probably pretty well suited to apply for the call that you're looking at. And if you don't really resonate with the questions, chances are it's probably an opportunity that you can let pass by. I'm going to go through this call in a little more detail here. Here, I say that we welcome submissions from all new media arts disciplines. This gets pretty specific because this is a call that's going out specifically for InterAccess, which is a new media artist-run center. So we want works that engage new media. That's what our organization is mandated to do. We get funds from the government to support media arts practice, and so that's specifically what we're looking to. And just to make it clear, I've included some examples of artistic practices like bio art, digital and web-based art, machine learning, analog electronics, experimental audio-visual works, and research-based practices. Research-based practices is a lot more open and doesn't necessarily fall within media arts practice, but I want to leave the call open to works in progress. And also works that don't necessarily come from arts practices specifically. So if you're looking into sustainable design, architecture, and have entry points into this call through that work that you do, I'm interested in hearing about that as well. And you can look down at submission requirements. These are also very standard in terms of, we want to see your project description, we want to see an artist statement, some documentation with some kind of parameters around how we'd like to receive those. Technical requirements will always be important at a gallery like InterAccess, but also just across the board. Like if you need any equipment to show your work, let them know, because it could be the difference between being able to show your work at all or not. And just because the place doesn't have the equipment that you're looking for doesn't mean they can't show your work. It just means that you might need to work a little bit more with the organization to get that equipment. An artist biography. It's good to have an artist bio that's in different lengths. So here we're asking for around 100 words. Some places might let you do a really long bio up to like 250 words. Other places might only want a 50-word bio. So just something to think about in terms of how descriptive you want to go there, and what you can include based on the length that's given to you. Here's where you send it. Exhibition details. There should be like a date scheduled for the exhibition, when artists will be notified. And also, if we're accepting works in progress, you have to make sure that your work will be ready by the beginning of install. That's an important one to keep in mind as well. We pay artist fees, and that's stated here. And we state that it's the CARFAC fee schedule, so you can at least know, you can look to the schedule and see roughly what the artist fees would be for a show like that. So ultimately, when it comes to a call for a group show like this, there are a few things that the person receiving them are looking for. One thing is that the work should cohere pretty closely with the theme that's outlined in the call. So those prompts and questions that you can see, you know, in the body text of the call, pay close attention to those. And, you know, are there certain theories or texts or disciplines that are being cited by the writer that are significant to you or your practice? That's one good thing to note. Works that can also be accommodated within a group exhibition context is something that isn't always obvious, but it's something that's really good to keep in mind. So how much space does your work need? What kind of resources are needed to show the work? So something like a video file that's easy to send and receive, that can be formatted into different sizes. That's a really good candidate for a group show, for instance, because it can share space well, versus a large immersive installation that needs a lot of equipment or is really expensive or time consuming to install. That might not be the best fit for a group show. That might be more solo exhibition project space territory. So to make sure that your work can exist alongside other works by other artists is an important thing, and also that your work can share an install budget with other artists. So that's an important one. Also, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to chime in the chat. Oh, great.
We have a question.
Nice.
Yeah, so do you, I don't know this. Is this call open to international artists?
This call is open to international artists. Yeah, so local, regional, national, international. I want to see it all. So yeah, you're welcome to share work, even if you're outside Toronto or Canada. Is there another one?
That's it for now.
Okay, cool. So I'll look at another call just to kind of illustrate a different kind. So this is a recent one. This one just closed. It's a call for Vector Festival 2020. Um, Vector is an annual festival of digital media and game art that InterAccess hosts each summer. Normally it happens in real life, even though there is, usually an online exhibition. There's a lot of kind of digital components that go into that festival. But this year, for the sake of, we don't have venues right now. We can't get together in person, so we kind of need to refigure our ways of working online. Now the festival is happening entirely online, and so this call went out to try to find digital works specifically for this new online Vector Festival. So this one is different from the exhibition call because it's asking for artworks in addition to texts and curatorial proposals. So here, kind of like the other call, there's the dates of the festival right up top, there's the deadline, and then there's some descriptive text. Oh my gosh, please, Bean, stop. My cat is being very interested in what we're doing. So the kind of thematic is described. There are a whole bunch of really great questions here that you can look at and see if there are entry points into that topic for you. And there are a bunch of different festival categories. So this is different from the previous call, which is asking for artworks to be shown in a gallery exhibition. This festival invites works that can be shown in a gallery, or I guess not a gallery exhibition, an online exhibition, as well as critical texts and like interactive or kind of animated text works. There is an invitation for workshop proposals, presentation proposals, so like artist lectures or panels, and also curatorial submissions for exhibitions and for screenings. So this call covers a lot of territory. The submission requirements are fairly standard, except for instead of submitting over email, there was an online application form that you just kind of plug in information, which when you have something that receives a lot of submissions like Vector, I think each year can receive like at least 250 up to around 400 applications. So we want to like have it as streamlined as possible because it makes the lives of the curators really easy. There are only 2 people and they go through all of the applications. So yeah. So I guess for a festival, it is a little bit different too, and it's thematic in the sense that festival themes tend to be a lot larger than a single exhibition. It'll be a bit broader, and the festival theme encompasses all of the exhibitions and screenings and performances, publications, everything that kind of fall under that festival umbrella. So the theme needs to be broad because each of those individual events or festival components will have to engage that topic in a different way. So like last year for Vector 2019, there was an exhibition on like apocalyptic futures in light of climate change. And there was an exhibition about human environmental interactions in video games, and a workshop on listening to plants with sensors. And all of these different events were under the theme of speculative ecology. So like imagining different futures, and it had kind of this like ecological framework around that theme. So big kind of lofty theme so that all of these different events can fit under it, which is great if you're applying and you're kind of like on the fringes or kind of tangentially related to that topic. A festival can be a kind of a cool way to get in on that without having that be the entire kind of world of artistic practice that you're working in. And also, festivals are really great places to submit works that are participatory or durational, that involve live performance, and also that can engage a crowd. Those are really good kind of works to think of in the festival context because there's a lot of kind of excitement. There's people who return to each event. The energy around a work like that and a festival can really cohere well together. So that's something to think about. Not that all of the works that are submitted to a festival have to be like that, but if you have a project in mind, then maybe a festival is a nice way to engage that. Cleo.
Yeah, Megan, another question. If you have several works that fall under the themes of a call, but the call doesn't mention the opportunity to submit several works, what should you do?
So if they don't say whether or not you can submit multiple works, probably ask and see if they will accept multiple works per artist. If they don't, it's really up to you to kind of have to make that difficult decision. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But for now, what I'll say is including a link in your application. So on your CV or in your email signature to your website that hosts the bulk of your recent work is a really good way to like have the curator or whoever is like reviewing the applications, that gives them an avenue to review the rest of your work without like inundating them with like sending them all of the works that you're doing. But regardless, even if you have multiple works that could apply, I would say choose like definitely the best like one or two, because if they want to know more and see more of your work and you provide them a way to do that through your website, then they will definitely prefer to go that route, and then to follow up with you if they need more details. I hope that answers your question. And I'm going to move on to a different kind of call if we're ready to do that, or if there are any more questions.
Yeah, we got another question.
Cool.
Do you have any tips or advice for submitting works in progress or works that are a new direction in one's practice? So
Yeah.
like a new departure from prior work outside of a festival context.
So for works in progress, I think it's great to submit works in progress. And sometimes what you really need with a work in progress is to have like a deadline to have it finished, and having like an exhibition opportunity committed for it is a really good way to kind of like have that fire under you to finish a project. So submitting works in progress, send any like mock-ups or plans that you have for that work. And also, it's a great idea to submit documentation of related or just complete works that you've done in the past, whether or not they're related, just so they can see like your aesthetic and like kind of how you've completed projects before. That can be really helpful. And the other one was outside the festival context. Sorry, what was that, Cleo?
Yeah, sorry, works that are a new direction in someone's practice. So a departure from prior work. Maybe
Right.
that's not related to what's on your website, maybe necessarily.
If something's a departure from your regular work, yeah, I don't see how that's I don't see the issue with submitting a work like that. Like I think, yeah, the only issue then might be if it coheres with like your kind of artist statement and how you're writing about your work. But just to, yeah, I guess make sure that that area of your practice, like you can acknowledge within your artistic practice that like, here's what I've done up until now, and then recently this is how I'm kind of starting to position my work and think about things. But I hope that whoever's on the receiving end of that application is open to seeing the way that like your practice is
Evolving?
is growing. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Megan.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll move on to another kind of call, which is a call for curators. I don't know that I see these as often, but I really like them because it really, it gives curators who aren't working in institutions already an opportunity to kind of like show institutions what they have to offer. And it also helps organizations to kind of get some fresh ideas in the mix. So the call for curators that we posted in 2018 yielded a lot of really, really great applications. So what we were looking for here was exhibition proposals from curators specifically. So we weren't really looking for artists proposing their own solo exhibition. We were looking for curated shows, the kind of like thematic structure. And we're looking for people who had experience presenting new media arts because, again, InterAccess is a new media art gallery. And so that's our emphasis. That's what we show all the time. And so we were open to either curated solo exhibitions or group exhibitions. And the exhibition slot was, I guess, for March, April 2020. So that actually just passed. And the exhibition that was chosen for that slot through the call for curators was Belinda Kwan's exhibition, Filling the Klein Bottle. So yeah, we had a lot of success with the call. We've pursued other applications as well because we got so many good ones for different slots kind of further in the future. And you'll notice that we're asking for the same things here. A lot of organizations will ask for very similar things, and especially within a single organization, our calls always ask for a kind of project proposal. So like an artwork description in some cases, in this case, an exhibition proposal. So outlining what the thematic of the show was, what works would be included, and then your CV, a list of support materials, and some specifications about how to structure your support materials, just to make sure that we have enough time to look through everything as a committee. And yeah, so details about sending your submissions, about us. So the call for curators, I have a lot to say about this one. So the proposals that were most successful described a central topic or thematic that was really unique and that we hadn't seen before, either within our own organization and also within other organizations in the city. So arts organizations within the same city kind of share an audience. And so if there are other galleries that are really exploring certain topics, you know, everybody wants to have something that's a little bit different or a little bit special. And so if you're submitting an application that has a very popular topic, it's important to make sure that your application highlights, the things that make your project distinct from other shows that have happened. Proposals should also demonstrate an awareness of the gallery's space and size. So usually our space at InterAccess can accommodate 4 to 6 works pretty comfortably, depending on their size. But if you submit an exhibition proposal to us that has like 12 artists involved, it'll be pretty evident that you haven't been to our space before because we can't really accommodate that, or at least not very easily. And so just checking the website, even if you're not located in the city and you've never seen our space before, just checking our website to look at pictures of past event documentation, or to see how many artists are generally included in each show. That can give you kind of a sense of what's possible within the space.
Megan?
Yeah.
Quick question. So lots of times in exhibition calls, especially in magazines, sometimes works are asked, they ask for works that have not been published before, but what does it really mean to be published if it's on your website? What is that? Do you have any advice for this person? Megan.
I haven't dealt with that a whole lot, but yeah, I think normally if it's like published in some external publication, that isn't just your website. So if you're uploading it to a site that you have full control over, from my understanding, that doesn't necessarily count as it being published. I think they just don't want to be in a position where they're publishing materials that have already been circulated within another publication, but that's not really my main area. I would probably fact check that with whoever it is you're pitching to, just to make sure. But from my experience, I don't think that your website itself would be a conflict. And actually having it on the website is a nice way to get them to be able to see it and access it. So I think that's probably a good idea. Do we have another question?
We have a few, but I thought maybe we can go through them during the Q&A.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. And
Um,
hopefully maybe I'll be able to answer some of them along the way.
yeah,
Um,
but I am keeping track.
cool. Thanks, Cleo. um, so let's see, what else? Okay, so another thing for calls for exhibitions, calls for curators, is that applicants should be wary of including artists that the organization has already exhibited recently. At InterAccess and at a lot of other organizations, they want to kind of like spread the love and bring other people into their programs. So if you're proposing a group exhibition with an artist who just had a solo show within the last year or two at that organization, that might kind of disqualify your application. So just keep that in mind. And if you really find that artist to be central to the show, then reach out to the organization and they'll let you know if that's a conflict for them. And so organizations like ours and also our funders really love resource sharing and partnerships. So if you're imagining your exhibition might coincide with local festivals like Images Festival or Imaginative or Nuit Blanche, then mention that because it's a really great way to show the organization you're applying to that you're thinking about your audience, and also how to expand it and how to bring the community in and to connect with other arts organizations. People get really excited about that who are reviewing applications. And also having a realistic timeline is helpful. So don't send an application proposal and expect that even if it's accepted that the show will happen within the next couple of months. Places like InterAccess have I think we have programming out for the next 2 years about. So keeping that in mind, um, be realistic with the kind of timelines that you're working with. And if you're submitting an exhibition proposal when there isn't like a call out like this one where it says like we're programming for this particular time of the year, then ask the organization to see when they have flexibility in their programming, because then it'll give you a better picture of like, okay, is this a project that I want to work on like that far down the line, or am I itching to get this presented somewhere more quickly, and then try to pursue um, that maybe at a smaller or more like DIY space. And if you're proposing a really ambitious project, like something that's multi-site, or where you want to commission a work for it, um, or that requires a lot of specialized tech that the organization might not already have, then mention in your application what kinds of grants you could apply for in order to get those things in place. Most galleries don't have resources available to exhibit a project that's larger than what they usually show. So just making sure that you recognize that and that you're willing to kind of like help to make that big project happen. And one great thing is if you're partnering with an organization to achieve a really big project that involves a bunch of extra components, then organizations can provide letters of support or be a co-applicant on a grant with you. So then you're able to kind of potentially increase your chances of getting that grant because you have that support from an organization in place. And there's one last call that we'll look through before kind of changing gears. This one is for InterAccess's local artist in residence. This one went out in the summertime. And this one is different because it's not necessarily an exhibition opportunity at all. It's more to do with the development of work. And we provided our space to an artist to come in and use our studio's resources to create a new project. And then you'll also see under the residency details that we were looking for the residency to culminate with some kind of public presentation, like a lecture or a performance or a workshop. So the residency, we listed a bunch of different resources in our studio that we were hoping someone to come in and kind of activate and use, because we have an active studio community already. But there are some areas of our studio that are used more than others, some where we have a robust selection of equipment that we can spare for someone to use for a very specific project. And so yeah, it was a nice idea to get someone in there and working regularly. We have residency details, including the dates of the residency, the kind of support that's offered. Um, Eligibility criteria was that the artist be local because we wanted someone able to come in and use our equipment and our space and come see us and hang out with us. And then adjudications and details on how the proposals would be assessed, and the kind of timelines that we were working with. I like that this one has that kind of transparency, and we'll talk a little bit more about the review process for applications a little bit later on. And of course, submission requirements with a residency project proposal and a CV and artist bio, parameters for submitting your applications. And we also welcomed people to come by and check out our space before applying, just to make sure that it works for them. Um, so for the residency, some things we were looking for was an original project idea. So an extension of the work that you're already doing, your practice, or a new direction for your practice that you want to begin exploring. But applications that were successful kind of fell more in that camp versus proposals geared toward replicating or restaging an existing work or something that you've done before. The residency was meant to kind of yield a new creative project. The project should be feasible and take place within the time and space allotted. So this is a shared studio space. So anything that required the storage of a lot of really, really large materials, that presented a challenge for us. So if you need to store a lot of stuff on site, checking in and making sure that that's okay. And also really, really massive projects that involved a lot of partnerships and resources that maybe exceeded the scope of a 3-month residency like this. Um, just making sure that that your expectations of yourself are also realistic, because we want you to be able to finish the project that you set out to. And sometimes collaboration and mentorship are built into a residency model. For this residency, Cleo and myself were available to kind of chat with artists and residents and provide some project support. But for a lot of residencies, they're very self-directed. So it's important to think about the skills and resources that you have and whether or not those are, you can rely on those to complete the project that you're imagining. And also, one important thing to think about when you're applying to anything really is why is your work a good fit for the organization, and why is the organization a good fit for you? Because the organization might have equipment or a type of space or a community or network that you really want to tap into. So to be clear about that and like what you could get out of it is great. And then also to talk about how your practice fits within the mandate of the organization is helpful as well. So for us, if you're working within emerging technologies, to kind of lean into talking about that, because that's kind of a really big emphasis for us. So that's all on that. Do we have any questions we can kind of go into now, Cleo, or are we saving those
Yeah.
all for later?
Just one quick thing while you're in the
Yeah.
section. Maybe you could talk a bit about the calls for emerging artists. We had a few people ask about that.
Yeah, so we do have opportunities for emerging artists. The kind of best, most targeted opportunity in that sense, I'll talk about more at the end of the presentation, but it's part of the IA Current program, which is a program where we bring on an emerging curator to develop a thematic group exhibition, and then a call for works goes out for that show each year. But I also want to stress that for any of our calls that go out, for the current call, Life as We Know It, or for workshops, or for any of our calls, like we really do enjoy seeing emerging practitioners apply. If you feel like you are relatively new to what you're doing or you haven't exhibited a lot before, that doesn't mean that you can't apply. And all the more reason to kind of do that and get into the cycle of doing that can be really helpful. And we also provide feedback for the most part on our applications, not always for Vector because there are so many applications, but for most other programs, for our artist in residence program, for a lot of the exhibitions that we do, we will circulate some form of feedback, even if it's just 1 or 2 sentences, which can actually be pretty helpful in the long run as you kind of continue to go about submitting. But we always welcome emerging practitioners to submit their work to us, because it's a nice way for us to learn about new people too. We can't be showing the same people all the time. So yeah, get in there. Cool. I'm gonna skip ahead to talking about how you know if like an opportunity is a good one for you to apply to. So the first big one, and I feel like I'll bring this up a few times in the course of this presentation, is just to make sure that you're actually eligible. So if it is an opportunity geared toward emerging artists, like maybe they'll specify what that means. Or if you identify as an emerging artist because you are new to making art, if you are a recent graduate or are still in school, if you have any questions about your eligibility for something like that, reach out. If it says that, you know, artists in Toronto are applicable, but you live somewhere in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto Area, if there's anyone tuning in who isn't familiar with that term, then, you know, ask that question as well, because there's nothing worse than getting an application that's really strong, but the person who applied is not eligible. It's kind of a waste of your time. It's not great for the person who's reviewing applications either. And in a lot of cases, if it's immediately evident that you're not eligible, they just won't look at your application. So to have that confirmed first and foremost is really important. Another thing to think about is organization type and mandate. So organizations are designed to support specific niches, so artists from certain areas, or artists working in a particular media, or artists at a certain level of their career. So to make sure that you're applying to an organization that is meant to support you and your practice can be really helpful. So you know, there can be a really great artist who submits to a call, but if their primary medium is you know, ceramics, and we're mostly a media arts gallery, so then I'm looking at it and I'm wondering, like, where are the sensors, you know, like I'm kind of trying to find the media in it, when it's not really what our organization is targeted to supporting. Pay attention to dates and deadlines to make sure that you're available for those days. Will your work be ready if it's still a work in progress? How much time will it take to ship? That kind of brings, will you be able to bring the work there yourself? Or is it too far away? Do you need to ship it? How much will shipping cost? Does the gallery pay for shipping? You should probably check to see whether they do or don't, because that'll kind of affect whether or not you're in a position where you can submit for that call. And also, it's really good to just get to know the organization, get a feeling from it. This is kind of a more preemptive thing before the call goes out, but just to familiarize yourself with an organization and its programs, to check out some of their events and their openings, and kind of get to know the space and their staff to see if that's a place where you can kind of see you and your work living for a bit. So yeah, and if you have any other questions about that, I guess we can feel free to add those in the chat, and then we can kind of get back to them later, because I'm sure there will be a lot of questions as we move through all of this. And then here are some particular tips for new media artists who are applying to calls for submissions. Equipment needs are super important. One of the most important things to keep in mind, you really should think about what you're able to provide equipment-wise as the artist and what you're expecting from the institution, and making it really, really clear who's contributing what. And be neurotic. Think of everything. Like think of every single thing that you could possibly need to show the work. Like practice or like mime it out or like draw it out to see like exactly what you'll need. Every single like cable, every battery, every adapter, every USB stick, every wall mount, like everything, because then it saves us so much time once we get to installing the show. Because we don't need to pay for express shipping to get that thing in time or run around the city and try to find it. It can really help us out. So especially if something like Vector Festival comes along and there's so many different artists, we have like 40 or 50 artists to manage, just to have everything really clearly spelled out so we can allocate all of the resources as best we can between all of those exhibitions and other events. It also doesn't hurt to check in and see what the technical savviness is of the staff that you're working with. So you could always just ask like, hey, has your staff supported the presentation of a VR work before? Or have you ever, presented projectors in this way? Because, you want to make sure that like you are leaving your work in safe hands for one thing, and that it'll be operated effectively for the course of the show. You want to make sure it's installed properly. And then if the organization you're applying to isn't familiar with it, it doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. It just means you might need to be more hands-on in terms of the support you give during an install, and during the run of the show, in terms of things like troubleshooting. And also, if it's unstated, you should try to clarify with the institution whether or not you'll need to physically be there to install the work. Some things are pretty complicated. Like if you need to install a whole bunch of sensors for a work that involves live feedback and you have all these like softwares and you need to be there to like calibrate everything, then it would be really nice if you were there in person to try to help out with that. And if they have support people there to help, then to be available at least over over the phone or over email, to kind of like expect that during the run of the show you will probably be contacted at some point because that artwork is doing that thing again. So yeah, it can just to have that kind of expectation is that media art breaks. So to be flexible and to be responsive, and to know that like the further away your work goes, like the more complicated somehow the problem will be. So just keep that in mind. Another really important thing is plugs. You want to have plugs. You want to have so many plugs. You want to be confident that the gallery you're applying to has enough power in the gallery to run your work. So our gallery, at least, we have plenty of plugs. We need them all the time. But if you aren't sure, like check with the gallery that you're applying to make sure that they have plugs available in the gallery. Especially if you have multiple works that are running power from multiple plugs, all the more reason to check. And if you're dealing with a gallery that doesn't have this kind of like media arts designation, you'll want to ask for a copy of a floor plan with plugs marked, because a lot of times they may not be. So the number and location of power sources will kind of tell you the gallery's capacity to support the presentation of new media art. And if you're applying for a festival and you don't know what the venue is like, you can ask the festival staff or whoever you're applying to if it's confirmed, if you want to know like what the kind of technical capacity is of the venue that the performance would be happening in or that the screening would be happening in. A lot of times they may not have that fully confirmed yet, but at least if you have these particularities set out, then when they're choosing a venue to present your work, then they can kind of take that into account. Some comments on DIY electronics. Some spaces have restrictions on the presentation of DIY electronics. So for instance, InterAccess requires artists to provide any custom electronics to our staff and board so that we can check them out before exhibition and to make sure that they can operate safely over the course of the exhibition. And if it's not safe, we'll make you fix it. So that we can make sure that it'll run without, any potential hazards. So like all of the electrical casings need to be just right in order for them to be run in the gallery every day. Kind of in the same vein, another thing to think about is the exhibition length and run time. So time-based works or works that are let's say you have a work that runs on batteries. So for instance, we had this one project by Jessica Thompson that we hosted in our studio, and it was a little battery powered Arduino that would tweet when you walked around with it outside. And it was like a wearable tech project, so it was like a hoodie. So it needed to run on batteries. And so the artist, when she dropped her work off, left us with like extra pre-soldered like battery packs, extra batteries. Like we had everything in place because we knew that over the course of presenting it, the batteries would run out. And just thinking about having replacements available. If you're like using your own specialized projector and it needs to run for a 3-month exhibition for 8 hours a day, then having like a replacement bulb for that lamp might be kind of nice to send along with your work. Things like that. And also artwork format and tourability. A lot of media artworks are so specific to the media that is chosen to create them. But also sometimes artworks are formatted in multiple ways. So there might be the robot itself, there might be a video of that robot doing its thing. And one of them is of course more circulatable than others. A video file can go really, really far and wide versus tangible objects can be harder to circulate. So I'm not saying that you need to change the format of your work, but a lot of times when we have international artists who will exhibit with us, they may have like different variations of a work that are easier to hand off to someone you don't know to present in another country, for instance. So like the simpler and more flexible your work is to set up, the easier it can kind of circulate into different gallery spaces. That makes sense. Okay, and now we'll talk about making an application, which some of this may be obvious, but it should be said. So again, the eligibility requirements, like if you don't meet them, probably just pass that by. No one wants to see a really great application come in, but they're not eligible for that program. It's a bummer. Don't do it. And also following the instructions in the call, like a checklist, can be really helpful. So if I'm applying for a call, I will like copy over the eligibility requirements into a Word document and like fill out those as like sections or like as like a test. To like make sure that I have everything covered and that I haven't forgotten anything. You don't want to leave any kind of unknowns in place. You want the person reading your application to really get a sense of what it is that you're working on and not to have any missing components, because that's just kind of like sloppy. And then even if they really like your project, they have to follow up with you to ask you to send whatever that was, and just slows things down a bit. Also making sure your files are well labeled and easily accessible. So easily accessible refers to like file size and stuff. Sometimes we'll get like WeTransfers that are really, really huge. Try to like get everything down to like the size that can be attached to an email. That'd be nice. We don't need images that are like more than like 2 megabytes. Like it doesn't need to be like a lot of really huge, you don't have to send your highest quality documentation. Sending things that are like easy for data management would be great. And also having them consistently labeled, so like having your name on it, having the artwork title in it, is good, better than just like artwork process one. Like, you know, just that can get lost pretty easily. Just have your name and the title in it. If it's a submission where you need them to be like numbered in a certain way, just like follow whatever it is that they tell you to do. And then in terms of your project proposal, exhibition proposal, having clear and descriptive writing goes a really long way for the person reading your application. They want to know what it looks like what your work looks like, what it'll do. But it doesn't need to be super lofty either. It should be pretty clear what you're getting at. And also similarly, it should be kind of like clean and like um, easily digestible to the person who's reading it, who maybe is reading a whole lot of applications, so that they don't have to stumble through what you're writing. So if you're not a strong writer, maybe you know someone in your network who is who's better with writing and editing, and having them just like take a look at it before you submit it can be really helpful. And also if you are one of those people in our community who write in a really complicated way, it can also be helpful to send that to someone else who has like a simpler way of getting their ideas across, so you're not like working through a whole bunch of theory when like you just want to know what the artwork looks like. That's another thing. Having high quality photo, video, audio documentation when possible is great. That's one of those things where it's just like good to know moving forward, but if you don't already have that, I know that's not extremely helpful, but as you're working on things, just taking photos and keeping the best ones can be helpful. And I also included here sharing documentation that illustrates the most important parts of the work. Which means if you have an artwork that is interactive in some way, sharing a video of people interacting with it and seeing what it does, that's really helpful, versus something that's more visual, or then photos will suffice. If it's something time-based, having like an excerpt of a video, all of these things that lend best to what the work actually looks like and feels like, is a good way to go about your support materials. And don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, it's better to get questions from you in advance and to make sure that your application matches kind of what we're hoping to see from you, versus, um, you know, you thinking that maybe you're not a good fit for it when you actually might be, or that there are some problems with your application. So questions about resources or equipment available, logistical questions, or things that like staff in a gallery or festival are really well equipped to kind of deal with. So I've included some examples here of like people ask us all the time, like, what kind of projectors do you have? What kind of VR headsets do you have? Because I don't think we have all of that information online, Cleo, do we? Have like an equipment list online? I don't think so. It changes all the time too, so that's part of it.
We have a list of what we have in the studio for members, and
Nice.
but it doesn't really.
It's different from the gallery though, I guess. There's some stuff that doesn't overlap. Yeah, okay. So yeah, you can check out what we have in our studio on our website, but it's not like the full scope of what we can exhibit with. So questions like that are completely valid. But I do also have some questions that I don't love getting. um, like, so my work is about all of these themes and these topics, and like here's like a whole artist statement already basically, and you know, what do you think my chances are of being accepted for this exhibition or this residency or what have you. And another one like, which of these works do you think I should submit? Here are like 5 different images of my work, which one do you think is the best one to submit? These questions are by nature pretty curatorial, and chances are the person on the receiving end of your app, like your inquiries, are not the curator. so they won't really know how to handle these questions. So usually they'll just tell you, or at least I will just tell you, like, hey, you should just apply, send what you have, send what you think are the best ones, but you're not really going to get a great answer to it. But if you are the curator and you are getting these emails, odds are you're not going to be looking at the works until after the deadline has closed. You kind of want to wait until the call closes and you have all of your applications in, and then you probably want to look through them that way. So to have messages coming in like, should I even bother applying? It's kind of, if you think it's a good fit for you, send your work, send your best work for this context. But it's hard for a staff member to kind of deal with this, and also for a curator to have the time, to expect them to have the time to kind of basically pre-read your application before you submit it. And moving along to the review process. This might be boring, I don't know, but maybe some of you haven't been on the like receiving end of like getting applications, so this might be helpful. So great, we get your application in, submission received, that's where we start. And then like I was describing before, the submissions are filed away until after the deadline. So if you're submitting to a call at InterAccess, like art@interaccess.org, that's coming to me, it arrives in my inbox, and then I put them in a file of submissions until the deadline closes, and then application review begins. So if it's a curator who's programming an exhibition, they'll take a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month or more, to review the applications. It depends on how many applications came in, so it's kind of hard to tell you exactly how long that process takes. And then the programming committee will review those preliminary suggestions, or not suggestions, I guess if you're the curator, you're probably making more firm choices, and then presenting those to the programming committee, like, hey, this is the direction that the exhibition's taking. And then our programming committee, who's comprised of members of InterAccess's board, staff, and also community members from artists and people who work in other arts organizations in the city. They'll provide some feedback on the selections, and if everything looks good, then they'll move forward to contacting the selected applicants first. And then once everything's confirmed, then contacting the rejected applicants. And usually if there's a more manageable volume of submissions, say we get like 30 submissions for something, then it's a lot easier for me to like go through and share even just a couple of sentences of feedback, because people seem to really have positive responses to like getting feedback. I think a lot of times folks who submit to a call for submissions, they send it and then they never really hear anything back about it at all, which I think is really harsh. So if you've taken the time to look through it, you've jotted some notes down while you're looking through it, you have the materials available to provide feedback, so it's great to do that. And one thing that I try to do, and I know that Cleo tries to do as well, is find other opportunities for people to get involved with our programming. So let's say someone submits a residency proposal and they're really, really skilled with projection mapping, and it becomes evident that we're not able to choose their application because it was a really competitive pool of applications, but we want to have them back in order to lead a workshop or talk about their work in an artist talk at one of our like studio events. So we're always looking for ways to get people who are interested in being a part of our programs into our programs, if not in the way that they applied for, in a different way. It's a little roundabout, but you know, a lot of times I'll get an application for an exhibition or an artwork, and we won't be able to include it, but we will have a panel coming up that's on a very similar topic, and it'd be great to have them come and speak about it. So you never know. I mean, that's kind of like a fringe benefit of applying to a call, is like maybe the organization you're applying to will have a good something else for you to get involved with. and some application tips, some etiquette. Um, it's nice to make it personal. So most galleries have a website with staff names listed. So if you can figure out who the email address you're emailing, like who monitors that, who that's attached to address them by name is nice. Getting an email that's like, "Hi, Megan," it feels like normal, better than like "to whom it may concern." So that's just like a nice touch if you can manage it. And submissions. Oh yeah. So submissions have that have been proofed, like the spelling is all checked, can be really nice. I mean, we're all human. Um, we all have an occasional like typo. It's not a huge deal, but spell the organization's name correctly. That's a good one. See how they spell it on their website. Just kind of keeping consistent with that is great. But also just making sure that your writing isn't laden with typos, because then that also just makes it kind of clumsy for people to go through. It's a little more professional and more polished if it's free of those errors that can be prevented. And send only what's asked for. So that's just out of respect for the reviewer's time. Don't send anything more. Like if there's a word count, adhere to that. If there's a limit to how many support materials you can send or how many works you can submit, stick closely to that. But also don't leave anything out. Just do what they're outlining, because chances are they're outlining what they want for a reason. And if you have any questions about your application, do reach out, but try your best to reach out at least one full day before the application deadline, and also take into account the business hours and the organization's time zone as well. And just like give yourself a reasonable amount of time, because like the person on the receiving end of that email has probably set working hours. They're not checking their email up into the evening. So if there's a call for submissions that ends at 11:59 p.m., try to email them like at least like the day before, and like they'll get back to you during daytime hours within their time zone. But try to give some space, because maybe they'll need to figure something out on their end in order to answer your question. And if you want a response in time for you to get your application in, just bank a little bit of time for that. It's not always possible. You might hear about a call really last minute, but if you can prevent it, you should. So I think, yeah, there's a question earlier, I believe, about sending multiple work, like can you send multiple works? Check, because a lot of places will let you submit multiple works. They may have a format where they'd like you to do that, or they may accept up to 2 or 3 works. But don't just like unsolicited like send a submission of like 7 works. Be picky, and I'm sure you have a sense of like what work is best for that opportunity. Maybe there's a couple. Be selective and represent those couple of works really, really well, and make sure that you have links available to your website where other works of yours live. So an example would be to submit your one favorite best work that would fit really well, and then if you have a whole like series of other work or a project that's ongoing, just in the body of the email just mention, and by the way, like I'm also working on this other project in that area, here's a link to it, or like let me know if you want any more information. Because if they do, they will reach out to you, and it's a lot better than like someone looking at an application that's like so full of so much information that it becomes like overwhelming, and it becomes a chore to kind of work through all of it. You want someone to be excited to look at your application, and if they want to know more, they will definitely pursue more details from you. And also check with a gallery before sending a cold proposal. Yeah, so I was describing before how galleries have programming for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years into the future. And the degree of flexibility that an organization has around doing their programming plans, it varies institution to institution. Um, so checking in before putting all of this work into an application and just sending it to an organization, um, reaching out and saying, hey, here's this thing that I'm working on. I'm thinking of submitting a proposal. Um, do you think there's space for this within your programming? Instead of fully fleshing out an entire proposal, having so much riding on it and having them be like, no, we're busy next summer. Yeah, that's a good way to go. And also it kind of leans into that whole making it more conversational, a little more personal, checking in. Um, that's a good way to kind of go about getting your foot in the door. And it also allows you to stand out from applications that are just submitted around in bulk. So sometimes an artist or an organization will like put together a package about one specific work and just kind of like fire it off to a bunch of different galleries really kind of generically. So by reaching out and making it more conversational and asking when's a good time to submit this, or is this a good fit, based on like this timeline that I'm working with, that can really kind of help your chances and saves a lot of time for everyone involved. Okay, we're coming to the end of this, and we're going to dive into questions soon. So if you have questions that you want to share in the chat, now is probably a good time. So I've listed a few places here where you can find calls for submissions. You probably have like favorite galleries that you follow along with. That's great. Checking out their websites just periodically if they have a newsletter. If you want to follow them on social media, that can be a really great way to like see calls like right as soon as they're posted. Give you a lot of time to work on your application. And then there are other places like Akimbo, Akin, Artscape. All of these places you can check out. And if there's anything that I missed too, post those in the chat as well, because maybe other people would benefit from that. So yeah, I think if you're into new media, follow InterAccess. If you do photography, follow Gallery 44. If you're into printmaking, follow Open Studio. Find places that post calls and opportunities in disciplines where you work, and hang tight, keep an eye out while you're working. And yeah, and some of these places too are quite specific. So like Rhizome is a place where international calls for specifically like digital and new media stuff are posted. Working Culture is great for like arts jobs, and like X Space Cultural Center has a Facebook group where they're always posting opportunities relevant for emerging artists of any discipline. So check out some of these places and see if there's a place that's good for you and that has opportunities, yeah, that are suited for you and the work that you do. And finally, we have some annual calls for submissions that are shared at InterAccess. Hold on. So I talked a lot about Vector Festival, which has a call for works that goes out each fall. So the festival curators will put together some kind of like thematic or more open call for works, usually in like around like October, November, for the festival that happens in July. And IA Current is a program that we've done for quite some time that supports emerging curators in working with new media. So usually in the springtime, things are a little bit delayed this year because of COVID, but a call should go out at some point, maybe in a different format, to support an emerging curator in developing an exhibition of emerging media artists. So we put out a call for exhibition proposals from emerging curators, and then the programming committee works together to select a curator to develop a group exhibition, and then a second call goes out that's written by that selected curator in order to get works for their show. And we also accept proposals year-round. So for exhibitions, you're welcome to send me a proposal at any time. And same with workshop proposals, those will end up with Cleo. And yeah, so again, it's worth checking in. Cleo, do you prefer if people check in with you before sending a workshop proposal with like here's the subject I'm interested in, and like, this is when I would want to run it? Is that valuable to you, or do you prefer to get a full proposal?
Either or, it's great. I'm always happy to get an email introduction and just checking in the waters, like if we're looking for new workshop instructors. But I'm also really happy to get a proposal, and we run 3 seasons of workshops per year. So every 3 or 4 months, we like have a new season, like 12 to 15 workshops that are publicly launched. So it's never a bad time to send me a proposal.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. And clearly there are details on the website as to what goes into a proposal like that, correct?
Yes, in the opportunities section where we
Cool.
post volunteer opportunities, and our workshop instructors are always listed there.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, you can check out our website and follow along with us and see when those calls go out. But I have mapped out like roughly when you can expect them to arrive on our website. And yeah, that's kind of all I've prepared for today. But we have plenty of time reserved for Q&A, so maybe we can kind of dive into that. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Megan, because I think you going through the chat might take a bit of time.
Do you have a better handle on all of this?
Yeah, so I have some questions that I can read
Sure.
to you. So there's a couple people that asked about recommendations or references, like resources on writing art proposals in new media art specifically, if people are starting out. This workshop is a great reference, but do you have any other recommendations?
Hmm. Um, I would say, I mean, the other example that I can think of as well is a workshop that we ran with Adrian. Do you remember that? The Working with New Media Art in the Gallery. Adrian Crossman, who's a media artist, um, ran a great session on working with media art in the gallery. So if you were interested in anything that I was talking about with respect to like specific things that media artists need to consider before submitting to a gallery, that's a really, really great kind of resource. I hope that we'll continue to kind of run events like that in the future. Um, in terms of writing applications,
There's other organizations that also run this similar type of tutorial info session.
mm-hmm.
Space, for example, runs it
Yeah.
maybe a few times a year. So can I keep an eye out on those free sessions is great. Um, yeah, maybe getting another artist that you know that has submitted and gotten like successfully, maybe getting some mentorship like personally from a buddy might be
Yeah,
good.
and actually, I did tune in for a recent session that X Space Cultural Center had hosted on this very similar topic, and I know that for emerging artists, X Space will like look at your proposal before you're ready to submit it. So if you have like a draft proposal and you want feedback on it, X Space is a really, really good resource for doing that. Because they will kind of comb through things in more detail beforehand. So yeah, I encourage you to check them out. And I think they recorded their session too. So just like this one will be added online after the fact, theirs I think will arrive online too at some point. So that's also a great place to check out. And they're really friendly over there. So to reach out to them, I wouldn't hesitate.
Yeah, and we just had some people sharing other resources for like how to apply for opportunities in the chat.
Oh, great.
Great, thank you, Joanne. Okay, I'll move on to the next question, Megan.
Sure.
So if you've been in the arts for a really long time but are relatively new to new media, as like the medium, how do you integrate your past experiences into your application so that it's helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in thinking about that, there's likely, I'm assuming here, but there's probably some kind of like conceptual thread that joins the bulk of your practice to your new directions as you're exploring new media. So I think in your artist statement to focus on like the ideas that you're exploring, and then the format that that takes is likely to change over the course of a single artist's career. Um, yeah, I think that a lot of times applications that will get aren't necessarily from artists who are by all accounts like a new media artist, but maybe they have projects that engage new media, and that doesn't disqualify them from participating in our programs. Um, and also, yeah, if you're looking to learn more about new media and how to expand your practice into more media centered areas, then InterAccess is a good place to do that, because we offer workshops, and now all of them are online and pay what you can. So even if you're not in Toronto, and even if you can't afford the kind of workshops that are more materially intense that we would host in our space prior to um, prior to COVID and needing to stay home, and for us to transition our programs online, then all of a sudden some of this, some of the resources to like round out your practice through new media is, it's never been a better time.
Okay, another question for the current call, Life as We Know It.
Yeah.
Can a duo collaboration apply? And if so, would they submit 2 bios, 2 CVs with the same requirements, or as one application?
I would submit it for a duo, submit it as one application, but then it's just, unless you're like a duo who has like a history of working as a duo and you like, that is, you know, your practice, and you have like a single shared statement and all of that. If you have separate artist statements, then just send one of each, and send each of your CVs.
Yeah. Is InterAccess accepting online workshop programming submissions? Yes, that's for me. That's funny.
Yeah.
We are actually. As I said, we're always accepting workshop proposals, but right now, definitely we're gonna be online for the next few months. So looking at workshops that are like platforms, web-based, that don't require a lot of materials, that are, you know, free for participants to join, you know, like thinking of like P5JS, it's like free online platforms. Those types of things are definitely on my radar. Okay, Megan, next question. Have we collaborated with fabricators to produce large-scale projects during the artist residency?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. I mean, the residency program is pretty new for us. So we picked it up in 2018 with a digital artist in residence who mostly worked with their own computer, their own equipment. And then for this residency, we had like a production stipend, which was fairly, you know, modest, but you got all the electronics components that the artist needed. But in terms of like a much larger scale project like that, that hasn't so far been a part of the residency program, but hopefully at some point, you know, as we kind of develop it, yeah, hopefully we can go in the direction of like having heavier duty equipment support for that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Is it common to apply to open calls with work that is already complete and has been shown, or are these calls de facto looking for new unshown work?
I can't speak for everyone, but For us, if the work is complete, that's great. And if you've shown it before, that's also fine. I mean, I guess the only kind of caveat would be if you've shown it in the city at a similar organization recently, then maybe that might be a conflict for someone. But in terms of just showing work that's already been completed or shown somewhere else, yeah, it's in great shape to be submitted.
That's all for the questions.
Ooh.
If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask their questions out loud, you're more than welcome. This was a very great, attentive group. So yeah, thank you so much for
yeah,
joining.
thank you all so much. That's great. I feel like I spend so much time thinking about calls for submission, so it's nice to like have a group together who also wants to talk about calls for submissions. That's great. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to chime in. You're welcome to email us if you have any other questions, especially me if you have any questions about the specific call at hand. If you have any like really particular questions that you haven't wanted to ask in like a group setting, you can just email art@interaccess.org, and yeah, I'll get back to you with more details.
I have a quick question. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Hi.
It's regarding to Life as We Know It.
Mm-hmm.
Just by curiosity, you expect people visiting the space, right? That it will be held in a space where hopefully people could.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many people would be able to visit at once, or?
That's such a good question, and I think about that a lot. Yeah, there is the risk of us not being able to be open in our full capacity, right? It's hard to know because we're not allowed to be open yet anyway. But once we are, there will probably be parameters in terms of how many visitors we can let in at a time. It might be one by one, scheduled by appointments for all we know. Yeah, I wish I had those details for you because I think about them a lot. But yeah, it's just fingers crossed at this point that we're able to open in the fall as we normally are. And then if we need to readjust or postpone programs, then we might need to do that. But for now, we're trying to run things as smoothly as we can with the information we have. But yeah, it might be like socially distanced gallery visits, probably no big opening reception like usual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we'll keep you posted. We'll keep everyone posted on the developments.
Oh yeah, you'll hear about it.
Yeah. So for example, if this, I would want it to actually reflect in my work. For example, if it's headphones or not, is this things that we could later discuss together? Building.
Yeah. One note on that, actually, if anyone's interested, is that with respect to the Life as We Know It call that's out right now, it seems like anything interactive might be on hold for a show like that, just in terms of things where people will be putting their hands on a lot. So I hadn't really thought of headphones. I was thinking mostly in terms of like virtual reality headsets, for instance, which that would be a harder sell, I think, for visitors, because it's just having hands on the same things would be difficult. But headphones might also actually be difficult as well, unless it's bring your own. Yeah, so that's something else for me to think about as well. But interactives, like things that people get their hands on, might also be a no-go for this show, just kind of given the circumstances and not wanting to be a place where someone gets sick.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, we can give a couple more minutes for questions, but I wanted to thank you, Megan, for this really detailed and thorough presentation. It was really interesting for all of us. Yeah, clap, clap. Okay, Megan.
Thank you.
You'll see in the chat, everyone is saying thank you.
Everyone's saying thank you. You guys are so nice. Oh, hi, Helen. Yeah, thanks all so much for joining us for this. Yeah, it's been nice to kind of go through and work through this myself, and yeah,
Um,
slides.
Slides. Did you want to share the link with? I can share it with everyone tomorrow morning.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'll share the slides with Cleo and we can get it out there.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.